Hi, this is Jan once again, and here I'm talking about cutting leather hides to make my handmade leather belts. So, when my leather is shipped to me, it is in these big bundles. This happens to be 2 hides that are rolled together. It is extremely heavy. It was hard for me to get it up on the table here. It's very hard for me to carry these down into my basement with where my workshop is. But it's also beautiful leather. It comes from a company called Weaver Leather, which is in Ohio. And again, the hardest part for me is opening these, and there's 2 hides in here, separating them and then cutting that straight edge. So this is, I'd say it's hard for me to unroll this and even get the paper off of it. So I have 2 hides here. The dark brown is the one I wanted to cut, and I have what's called a russet, a chestnut color, I guess. So this is the hard part because I'm gonna roll one this way. Try to roll this one up. Now these are full grain hides, so they do have a scar in them at some point, so I need to cut around that. But as you can see, this table is 6 feet long, so these hides are 6 feet long, so I can make a belt to fit a like 55-inch waist. If I cut it the other way, the lengthwise, which the room is not big enough for me to undo it that way at the current time. Let's open this one. It's going to roll back up. Alright, so getting that one out there. Rolling this one up here. And again, that's a different piece of leather that I'm going to hike over here for the moment. Alright, so now this is the back side. This is the front side. I usually, if I draw and things, I do it on the back side. So now I have to decide which way I'm going to cut. And generally there's enough length. You know, I don't need belts too many over 60 inches long. People laugh at some of my belts because I do make them extremely long, but that's because people come in all sizes. So I'm probably on this going to cut it this way because, like I said, this table is 6 feet long. This hide is just a little bit longer than the table. So that's going to make like a 58-inch belt. So the first thing is to draw this straight line. And just, I think, actually on this one, I'm going to draw it just on the front side because it's going to be easier. Again, I have to have this cutting board underneath, and that, you know, isn't long enough for the entire table either, so I have to do it in segments. There's a slice here from where this was hanging, which is, you know, how leather hides are preserved. So I'm just going to make a line here. I'm going to draw it with this marker. This little, kind of like, not quite a gel pen, but it's kind of like glittery. It will wipe off, which is why it's used for doing things like this, because I can rub it off the edges. Alright, so I kind of get the straight edge like that. Now the hard part is cutting that straight edge. And because the hides are so huge, and I only have a cutting board that goes for part of the table, I'm going to pull it down to the edge here. Again, I have to keep the hide rolled up because I don't have enough space in this room if I don't. Try to get down near the edge here so I can cut as far as I'm able. A lot of times I do use clamps and things if I can to help hold, maybe just shy of where I want to cut. And I literally have to get on the table pretty much to cut this so that I can hold it straight. Try to cut a little bit here at the beginning first. Oops, no. No, close. I have to use a steel ruler, of course, so I don't slice the ruler itself. And it does take I should have a larger X-Acto knife. It's actually a D-X, I'm not sure why I'm using the small one. Alright, and that, you know, this is the hardest part, and then I have to keep going. I'm going to literally get up on the table so I can hold my line down. All right. And again, so that's how this part goes, and this is the hardest part. And, you know, I usually have to straighten it out a little bit. So I will continue with that at another time. Thank you very much. Bye. Now that I've cut the straight edge on my belt here, it's now time to cut the piece into some belts. So what I'm doing now is I have these pieces I use that give me the widths of the different belts. I'm looking for 1.5 inches, so that's that one. And they tell me the exact width, so all my belts are going to be the exact same width. 1.5 inch belt is going to be a slight bit under 1.5 inches because the buckle is exactly 1.5 inches wide, and if the belt is 1.5 inches wide too, it's going to rub and ruin the edges of the belt. So it's a, you know, about an eighth of an inch different. Between a 16th and an 18th of an inch different. Just enough so it will slide through. So now that's the right width. I put that through there. So this is called my belt stripper, and this is how I'm going to cut my belts. The tools are right behind you on the wall. So putting those back. So now that I've cut the straight edge, again, this is a dark brown hide. And put the stripper along it. And basically, I just have to pull. But what I have to make sure is that this edge stays flush with the edge of a piece of rubber to make it still straight. And I can keep cutting belts. And after a few belts, I do have to check the edges again and make sure I haven't veered off. Generally, that happens at the very beginning or the end, you know, very end when you're trying to get this started. If the leather is nice and firm, which it is here, it's going to be a little rubbery there. I can keep cutting the belt strips. And so forth. Now, the difference with my belts for a lot of belt makers, my belt strips are long. This table is 6 feet long, so this strip is probably 65 inches long, which means I can make a big belt. A lot of people don't need it that size, but if you buy a belt from me, it is custom fit at the time of purchase. So don't tell me your pant waist size. I want to know the exact width around your belt, around your waist, because I am going to make the belt fit perfectly. You buy a belt in a store, it comes in standard sizes. Usually has, you know, might be 8 holes in it, but then if you're on one of the inner holes, the belt is way too long. Depends on how it's made. If it's sewn, it can't be cut or shortened because then the stitching is going to come out. My belts are solid leather, as you can see. One firm hide. It is very thick. You can see the edges on this. It's very thick leather. And then those edges are going to be rounded and burnished, which is what I'm going to show in some other videos in a bit. But again, this is how the stripping goes. I got them in all different widths. I can change them, you know, the width on this to make different. But right now, this is the width I need in this color, so that is what I'm going to continue to do. Next, I'll be showing you how, you know, I trim the ends, and then I bevel them, and so forth, before the edges are then dyed, burnished, smoothed out. That's another reason my belts are a little bit better than others, is because a lot of belts you buy, you're going to just get the raw edges like this. I mean, they're going to be colored. But see, that's the thing. They need to be colored. And so that's what I do to make them look good all the way through. That's going to be it for now. See you again soon. Bye. Again, the same pieces I use to make the belt strip the correct and standard width so they're all uniform is also what I'm going to use. And these are different shapes to cut and trim these. I notice on one of these belts it does have a scar in it. These are full grain hides and they do have a scar in them. So I'm going to trim this one here. But what is really nice about this leather is how beautifully it's finished on the back, which is why I like the weaver leather. This is a black belt on the front, but this is the back of the leather. It is beautiful and smooth, and I think that makes into a really nice belt. It's a brown on the back. And so forth. So that's a piece I just cut off. So that's pretty much a scrap. So then I have to go through them width by width. I generally trim it straight. It's a little rubbery, so I tend to trim off a little bit more. I use these to put up against the edge and to trim. The other end is going to be, it needs to be a straight cut, and it's going to then be rounded off with a tool to round off those corners a little bit instead of having them straight corners. So that will be next. But first I go through all the belts and I do this and get the point at the top done, and then I go back. So I do things in steps to make it more like a process like a factory or whatever. Do all this on these sides of the belts. Then I'm going to go cut these edges straight, round the corners with a special little tool. I have to use a different kind of mat than this. Now, a thicker one. It's more like a kitchen cutting board. And that's going to round the corner. So that's going to go up here on the corner of each belt to round it off. So I'm not sure if I'm going to show that part on camera or whatever. The next step after that is to bevel and burnish the edges. So that will be, or bevel the edges and so forth. That will be coming up next. Thank you. Talk to you soon. The next step in the belt making process, for me anyways, once I've cut the tip there and now I've rounded the end off on that side, that's the buckle end. This end, of course, I'm not going to put holes in it because my belt's a custom fit. The next thing I have to do is bevel the belt. And so this is a beveler. It has a space in between there. They come in different sizes, different thicknesses, the different kinds of leather. This is a number 2 actually, which may be a little small for what I'm doing, but again, this is my preferred size. I should make sure this is sharp and ready to go, but I don't have my stroke right handy. Yes, I do. So I have to clean this up a little bit before you use it. All right, now I am ready to bevel the belt, and I'm hoping you can see enough of this on the camera. What I have to do with this tool is what it's going to do is it's going to round off the edge of the belt, which you'll see in a minute. It's going to round it off so it's not straight and squared like it is there with sharp corners. So it's going to round it off and smooth them, it's not going to smooth them down. That's another process. So I start at the end here. I try to keep it against the screen mat to keep it firm. And I have to run this along the whole edge of the belt. It cuts off a little piece. Leather work is one of the messiest things you will do. There is scraps for everything. And everything you do makes scraps. I'm going to turn it this way. Got to make sure I have little pieces underneath it that are going to affect how it comes out. Go back on this side. And the hardest part again for me is around the corners here, getting that part smooth. And again, so I've cut off this little piece. I've rounded. If you see how this, you can now see a lighter edge there. That's the difference between the squared edge. And now I have to do that on the back side of the belt as well. So same thing. Pull that little piece off the scrap. Again, the corner part is the hardest to get smooth. This is also a very easy tool to cut yourself off. If it slips off, which is the other reason why I'm keeping it against the screen mat, if it slips off, it's kind of like a vegetable peeler. It's the closest thing I can say that most people would be familiar with. You know, it has a blade in the middle, so if I slide off onto my hand, it cuts me pretty good. And again, so holding it against the firm surface helps some. Now this is a step that a lot of belts I see online do not have, which makes them, again, more comfortable. Rounding the edges off makes it more comfortable. The next step after that, now it's done on both sides, makes it rounder, far more comfortable than having a straight edge like that. Now the next part is that has to be dyed, and then it has a coat of finish put on it, that's smoothed off, things like that. So those will be what I'll be showing next. Stay tuned. It's in a different part of my workshop, so I have to move to another station. My workshop is set up in stations, and it is set up around the things that are in my basement. It's not really set up for a workshop. I'll be back with you again later. Bye. So now I'm in a different area of my workshop where I do all my dyeing and messy stuff. So this is where I am now. I have one of the black belt strips that I burnished or beveled the edges and so forth, rounded them off. Now I need to dye that edge so it is black like the rest of the belt. So I'm going to try to show this so you can see what I am doing. So I have a bottle of dye here, just liquid dye. I just put it in these because it has a wider mouth than the jar that it comes in, and it's easier to get my wool dauber in. And basically I'm wearing gloves because this is very messy, and an apron because it will stain my clothes. And I have to paint this all the way down the edges, making sure I'm getting all the edges, trying not to drip it, but I've got to get this edge on the front. Side too, so I'm trying to, again, I don't know if that shows on the camera how I'm dyeing that. So I have to do this all over the belt, front and back. I mean both sides, both edges. Turn it around, do the other edge. And then after that, I will put what's called tragacanth on it. Now the belts have been, the edges have been dyed. I did about 20 different belts, so I do this in series. I had a whole series of brown, dark brown, and black belts I did. I've done the edges. I do go over those twice. Now I'm pretty much going to do the same thing, putting what's called tragacanth on the edges, and then they're going to be burnished to be smoothed down. So pretty much same process I just did a minute ago, where I am just going to dip this into the, and it's going to be rubbed on the edges like this, just like the dye was. And then it's going to be put through my, I have a drill press with a wooden burnisher on it, and that's going to smooth up these edges nice to make them nice and silky and smooth. So that will be the next step I do in a moment. I have to move the camera, so I'll be back with you in a moment. So now I'm here, again, just around the corner of the table where I was doing the tragacanth on these and dyeing the edges as I'm touching it now, is right in front of me. The machine I'm going to use now is actually a drill press, and it has a special wooden burnisher on here, and I'm going to turn it on and burnish the belts. This makes a little noise, so I probably won't keep it on for long, but basically what I'm going to do is, as this is spinning very fast, there's different grooves in here, and one groove is the right width for this belt, which is this one, and as that's spinning, I'm going to rub the whole belt along it, moving it along like this, so it's going to burnish the fibers down. So I'll turn it on and show that for a second, but again, it makes a lot of noise, so you're not going to hear me talking or anything once I'm on video. like I said, pretty loud. So that's done all over this edge, you know, turned around, done on this side, turned upside down, done on these sides. So that's the burnishing. Then I feel how rough they are, and sometimes I need to do that a second time. And now we'll be on to the next step. I am in another part of my workshop. I have beveled the edges. They are nice and silky smooth here. They're dyed nicely. I did wash the belt off just to make sure, you know, there was no residue from anything with saddle soap. Now I'm on to my next piece of equipment. Again, I really only have 3 pieces of electric equipment in my workshop. You just saw the drill press. This is called a bell skiver. Those are the 2 I use for belts, and I do have a sewing machine, which of course has nothing to do with this. So this is the bell skiver. And again, what it's going to do, it's going to thin out this leather here. This is where it's going to have the buckle. And see how thick and bulky that is for a belt that is too thick right there. So I'm going to thin it out just a little bit in here, which is where the buckle is going to go. I'm not going to thin out the ends. I'm just going to thin out in between there. So I put it in here. I set this. Again, sometimes it needs to be tightened. Depends on the thickness of the leather and so forth. But this circle here is a knife. I'm not sure if it can show inside here or not. But it's a very sharp knife in here. It's a circle. And so it's going to skive this off once I turn it on. This isn't as loud as some of the other things I have. And I'm just going to... So see, now it's too tight. Alright, now it's turning, so now I'm going to pull the belt. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to shave that piece completely off the end. I want to leave it like that so you could see it, but what it's doing, it's thinning a piece out, so when this folds now, it's going to make this so it's not as bulky as it was. It could use a little bit more skived off there. But that's basically showing you it's cutting a very thin piece of leather. They can cut thick, you know, it depends on the thickness of the leather and the setting, you know. So I could probably do that a tiny bit more. Down to about the same area. Need to tighten it. Again, you know, the idea is not to make it too thin because you want it to obviously hold up. But now that's going to be able to fold a little bit better. So when there's a buckle in there, it's not going to be real bulky on your waist. So that's what the skiver does. Next, off to punch the holes for the buckle, the slot, and the 2 holes where the belt screw will go in. So now we have traveled to the very last station in my workshop for this video about how I make my belts from start to finish. I've gone from cutting all the way through. So now I'm just going to cut the slots for the belt. I've skived it. Now I'm going to cut the slots with the hole in this, so I'm in a different work area because I have to have the firm table. I don't do this on the table where I do the cutting and stuff because that's a banquet table and it can wiggle and so forth, so that's not what I want. So here I am. I'm not sure how well that shows here. Angle is not great. Whenever you use leather tools, you always use special hammers so that you're not going to peen over the end of the tool. I'm placing this in the center of the leather. I have to punch the slot. And I have to punch the 2 holes, which is where the belt screw will go in. So again, I go through when I do this to all the belts, and then I'll go back, and so now I'm making sure I have that hole in the right place on this side. So it'll be centered, and then that will be ready for this buckle next, which I'm not sure if I'm going to actually show that. I guess I should.